was a 6 or a 7, to put it in crass terms, with a very nice figure. But I've never been into clothes, makeup, or drawing attention to myself, and no one has ever said, damn, about me like they do him. I like books, my garden, and spending time with close friends. I wear jeans and t-shirts, I don't color my hair or paint my nails, and I'm usually the one who unclogs a pipe or replaces an electric fixture around the house. I love my job. We have a pretty egalitarian marriage in terms of income and labor, but less attractive guys I dated before him made me feel more physically valued, more like they were also lucky to have me. I have a high sex drive and often felt frustrated during the first 10 to 12 years of our marriage, during which we had 2 kids, because he frequently indulged in pornography more often than we had sex. It hurt my feelings and made me feel inadequate. Eventually, we discussed how hurtful this was for me, and he recognized that was a way he was avoiding intimacy. He is generous in bed, and when we do have sex, it's always been very satisfying. Became more so after we discussed the porn issue. However, I have always felt that my appearance is somewhat disappointing to him, and that he's compromising or doing me a favor in the physical attraction department. All of these years together, I know he loves me. We are dear friends, and we've built a wonderful family. But I can't get over the feeling that I'll always be his comfy old pair of stretched out sweatpants, and never the sharp, new, outgoing suit, so to speak. Until about 2 years ago, I was the same weight as when we got married, but post-40, I, like many humans, have experienced some middle-age spread and gray hairs, while he seems not to have aged at all. Recently, we always seem to be asked, is this together or separate when we're at stores or restaurants, which, since it never used to happen, makes me think, what the F? Is it really so implausible that we're a couple? I think if I were the man and he were the woman, the dynamic would be totally different. But it's really painful for me. Now, he is having some intermittent issues with impotence, which is also totally normal for a man in his mid-40s, but I can't stop feeling like it's my fault. Like he'd be raring to go if only I were pretty enough or 10 years younger. I fantasize about having an average-looking lover who'd just be super into it. Everyone has things about their spouse that are not their ideal, of course. I wish he would read more so that we could talk about books and remember to turn over the compost pile. It doesn't bother me at all to think he wishes I didn't forget clothes in the washer until they smell mildewy. So why does this one thing, my average appearance, make me feel so terrible about falling short? It's making me draw away from him and want to be alone. Although he swears he thinks I'm still cute and doesn't think about that. How do I get over this negative feeling?
Yeah, that's a tough situation. I feel like we've had a similar write-in before.
We've had ones about pornography.
No, about like differences in
physical attraction
in a relationship.
Not one with this level. So we've had it where they were dating for like 2 weeks and the person felt insecure.
Yes, that's
These guys have been married for 20, or they've been together for 21 years, married for 18 years. They have 2 kids, and it's still her feeling.
Yeah, and here's what I would do, to the listener, if you were my client and we were, in therapy, one of the first things I would want to explore is I'd want to explore your belief system and looking for any kind of distorted thinking patterns, because it kind of goes back to something that we've talked about on this show quite a bit, which is confirmation bias. Mm-hmm. It's that distorted way of looking at things. When we believe something, we always look to prove ourselves right, not wrong.
Right.
We never intend to prove ourselves wrong. So this can create this snowball effect of identifying all of these things that are happening or that we perceive are happening, whether they're happening or not. So if it started off right away in the very beginning that you felt like you were the less attractive one in the relationship and you felt like he was more attractive and that had some insecurity with it, thinking that he could leave at any moment to find somebody else, if that's the starting point and that thought process is never challenged, what likely is going to happen? We're going to continue to look for things, right? There could be 9 things that happen that disprove this, but if one thing happens that confirms it, that's the one we remember. We don't even acknowledge the rest. So, the things with, asking, for example, you go to a restaurant, the example that you gave, they're asking, is this together or separate? Okay, You could be right. This could have something to do with your appearance and the perception of mismatch that you two don't belong together. But are you 100% sure that that's actually the case? Could there be some confirmation bias? Could this honestly be just a waitress asking an innocent question, but because of your insecurity of this issue, you are more sensitive to it and you read into this more than what it might actually be?
Yeah, and to piggyback on that as well, another thing that I want to look at is, so let's say you're right. Let's take it that way. There was a study that was done where we took I didn't do this, but this was science did, and I'll speak on behalf of science. They did this thing where they took 10 men and 10 women, and they sort of had them ranked, right, according to physical attraction. It was based on surveys. And each one of them did not know what their number was. It was 1 through 10. And they were remember this one? Yeah. And they were wearing the number on their forehead. and so they had to walk from one side to the other. There was a line of men on one end of the room, a line of women on the other, and they had to walk without speaking and pair up with another person. They had to pair up with somebody of the opposite sex. And so they all know what the numbers represent. And it was fascinating because the women tended to swarm the 10. Because they want women tend to have this mentality that you leverage your looks for value, right? So they believe themselves to be higher than they really are, and they're pursuing the 10 guy, to try to get him. And the guys didn't care. The guys didn't they just didn't really look at the numbers so much as they looked at the girl, and if they seemed interested in the guy, he was interested in her. And so it's a fascinating takeaway that the way that we pair up, we tend to match. That is a thing. There is such a thing as social matching. So I understand this writer's confusion and saying, hey, I've never felt like I'm completely matched. But the other thing I want to point you toward is this concept of needs. So when we're talking about needs, there's this theory called His Needs, Her Needs. It's a really good book by Dr. Harley. And in His Needs, Her Needs, I was just talking to a client about this today, we tend to look at female needs versus male needs. And they, we all have the same needs at some point, but they might come away, a little bit more distinguished in certain patterns. The pattern that we notice among men is that we tend to notice about 5 needs, and there's also 5 women needs, which we can get into later if we need to. But the needs are basically this. I'm going to rattle them off for you really quick. So, and this is in no particular order. The first one, just in no particular order, is sexual fulfillment, okay? And so that's actual, sexual engagement, enjoying your sexy time together, right? Number 2, affirmation. Do you make a man feel admired? Does he feel like he's valuable when he's in your presence? Is that a good experience for him? Another one is domestic support. Does he feel like, when he's in your presence, is that a sanctuary? Does it feel safe? Do you make a house a home? That kind of thing. Another one is attractive spouse, and feeling like your mate is actually appearance-wise appeasing to you and you like that. And another one, the last one, is recreational companionship. And that just means, do you play together? Do you have a sense of enjoyment of friendship together? Men tend to need that. Now, I've just listed off 5 things. Only one of those was attractiveness. Any given man might prioritize those 5 things in a different order. It could just be that, and I'm buying what you're selling here. I mean, Nick's challenging your thinking and saying, hey, are you sure that maybe the appearance differential is as wide as you think? I'll come alongside you and say, okay, maybe it is. But what you're not giving credit to is your husband may not have that as the most important value in his life. It may be recreational companionship. He may value affirmation. He may value domestic support. He may value sexual fulfillment. He may value the friendship aspect. He may value the intimacy that you guys have. He doesn't necessarily have to be attracted to your physical appearance first and foremost. So the fact that it's an issue for you doesn't necessarily mean it's an issue for him. And I point to Exhibit A, 21 years together, to probably make the argument for him that whatever you guys are doing, it's working.
Seems to be working.
It seems to be working. And, I would argue that now you're in your midlife crisis age, right? You're coming into your 40s. Now you're feeling insecure about your looks. Guess what? That's how we all feel. I'm in my early 30s and I'm like, I'm looking in the mirror like my pores are huge. I found a gray hair on my side the other day and I was taking pictures of it and trying to make sure there was only one. We're all going through this all the time. And if you're in your mid 40s, this is exactly when you're due for that kind of thinking anyway. It's probably just exacerbated because you said your husband still looks really good, which also, Nikki, could be a vampire because she says he doesn't age.
I have met guys like that. Not vampires.
Okay. That you know of. You don't know.
You're right.
Yeah,
You're right. I could be wrong.
Rule it out.
But sooner or later, age will always catch up.
Yeah. But also I think a lot of women feel like this, Nick, because I've heard a lot of women say, regardless if they feel like their man is more attractive than they are, if we're looking at the full-time scale of men versus women attractiveness, and we've seen studies like this too, women's sexual peak, so to speak, of when they, seem to be, Darwinian evolution-wise, the most attractive would be 20s to early 30s. Generally speaking, that's what we see. Men, on the other hand, tend to ripen with age, so to speak.
Right.
A lot of times women say, I find men more attractive when they're in their 30s and their 40s. They're more attractive than they were when they were teenagers. And girls tend to date older guys. There's that stereotype that tends to happen. And so whenever you and your spouse have been together for 21 years and now you're both in your 40s, he's coming into a golden era and you're probably leaving yours. And that can exacerbate that feeling of insecurity, but that doesn't mean it's real.
Right. And the other thing, too, I'd touch on also just real quick is, the comment that you made about, fantasizing about having an affair. And that's not going to solve the problem.
No.
This is definitely, I would really encourage you to, maybe get into therapy, talk to somebody about this. Having an affair is not going to make things any better.
Yeah.
Because, looking at it from the guy's perspective, I mean, if he obviously is in love with you, he's still in this relationship. It sounds like everything's going well for the most part. That's only going to make things more complicated.
And another thing that's interesting about this too, Nick, I have seen a study which has indicated that men's sexual peak when their drive is the highest is, I think it was like 16 to 26 years old.
Yeah.
And women's sexual peak was something like 35 to 45. And it was like, again, another Faustian bargain here that somehow these two tribes never will find each other at the right time. But this could be evidence of that. This could be his sex drive naturally declining and her sex drive naturally starting to escalate. And now the two ships are passing in the night and she's saying, is it me? And no, it's not you. And will another man make me feel more wanted? Perhaps, but you're trading an awful lot to get that. And this is where a therapist is going to walk you through all this to figure out what are feelings and what are facts. All right, you're listening to Pod Therapy. We're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we talk about Stage 5 clingers.
And we're back, and you're listening to Pod Therapy. Our next write-in, title, How Do I Tell My Clingy Girlfriend to Be Less Clingy?
Yeah, you just did it.
All right.
Problem solved.
Thank you very much. Thanks for writing in. Long story short, my girlfriend is very clingy, and I don't really have any alone time or time with friends anymore. I love her very much, and I love spending time with her, but it's to the point where she will take it personal if I want to hang out with others or without her. I know if I bring it up, it will probably get into a very big argument, which I'm trying to avoid. Is there any advice on how to talk to her or help the situation improve anyway? I feel like I'm losing my friends, but I don't want to lose this relationship either.
I think a lot of people relate to this. And so when I heard this question, the first thing I thought was that word codependent. Perhaps the girlfriend in the story is struggling with that and maybe feels like unsafe or wants this person around. Maybe she feels insecure, like, oh, if he's not with me, then other people matter more than me. Gosh, Nick, that's a hard one, though. Have you ever had a stage 5 clinger relationship?
Yeah, and I think there's... I've noticed two...
Why are you pointing at me? I feel like...
You know why.
Okay.
Now, I feel like there's two reasons why this happens. I think number one is sometimes insecurity, that you feel like if they're not with me, what's going on?
Right.
The other one, I think, sometimes just has to do with expectations of what a relationship is. Depending on what her past relationships have been like, if her past relationships have been very codependent, and this is the idea that she has, like this is what a relationship looks like, we're also looking at her parents. We learn about relationships by watching relationships. That's the first one we ever see. So my parents never had friends outside of themselves. They did everything together. They were always together every night. Okay, so now that sets the tone for your expectations of a relationship. So my advice to you would be to actually just sit down and have a conversation about what are the expectations. What kind of independence do you expect in a relationship? And And, when are those breaks that we can have and still have a healthy, partnership?
Yeah, I agree with that. And what I don't see in this explanation is I don't see her reaction.